Thank you, Jill, for that really rousing and inspiring speech. Going on the streets and protest. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak before you. Thank you for the organizers for organizing this event. And I can't help but start by responding to one of the comments that Jill made about moral hazard. It really spoke to me deeply because, I remember, I'm an economist, obviously. I went to school in the capitalist economics school of thought, which, of course, obviously as a socialist, the suspense is broken, I don't buy into it. but I remember reading that in my textbook and I was saying, I don't understand this. What the hell do they mean? Moral hazard? I mean, so I really agree with what Jill said. All the lack of morality lies in the, it falls at the feet of the 1% or even more so at the 0.01% at the top who are actually perpetuating and defending a completely immoral system, unjust system of exploitation, not just in the United States, but globally. But I wanted to start, by actually pointing out why it is so critical that we are all here today. I mean, we've been, together with the Green Party and Socialist Alternative, doing a speaking tour. We spoke at Western Washington last night. We spoke at Evergreen State College earlier today, and we've been meeting a lot of young people and older people and people from different walks of life. This is important not only in itself because we need a shake-up in what's happening in the United States, but I want you to think about this. Globally, the source of all this injustice and exploitation and inequality that I'm presuming has brought you here today, this is rooted in the system of capitalism. And the United States, the billionaires in the United States, they represent the seat of the global power of capitalism. So please do not ever make the mistake of not recognizing the critical importance of the masses of the United States rising up, because that provides such a powerful example for everybody else in the world. If the American, it's like the sleeping giant, the American working class, the American youth, and American ordinary people. This is the sleeping giant that needs to wake up in order to actually bring about a tremendous sea of change all over the world. So I hope you can take that with you when you leave here tonight. And I wanted to also say, I wanted to talk about the state race quickly, but I wanted to say one thing that, when you go outside and then you talk to your friends, I hope you will be making the argument to them that they should vote green and vote for Jill Stein. And I am pretty sure you will run into this whole, this won't she be a spoiler argument. And I want you to tell them this. If in an era of the deepest economic crisis since the Great Depression, in an era when the census has reported that almost half the US population is either actually poor or heading very quickly into poverty, in an era where the Occupy movement, the Wisconsin Uprising, and the Arab Spring, and the Egyptian Revolution, and the Tunisian Revolution have ultimately broken the silence on the inequality and injustice, in an era when the youth of the United States are facing a bleak future, and they know that, they're now realizing that, and they're facing this double whammy of bleak job prospects along with the ball and chain of student debt that Jill mentioned. In such an era, if a party that is supposedly liberal and progressive and standing for progressive values and for ordinary people, if that party cannot win, and in fact, not just win, but sweep the floor with this robber baron, Mr. 1% buffoon that the Republicans have, if they can't win against him, hands down, then they have themselves to blame, not Jill Stein or anybody. It will be the difficulty that Obama is having now, and the fact that he is neck and neck in the polls with Romney. It's a testament to how how shamefully and disgracefully the Democratic Party has betrayed every single arena that its supporters and that its voters have stood for. And Jill went through the litany of that. I wanted to also add, climate change. I mean, I don't know how many of you watched how many of you watched the second debate, by the way, presidential debate? How many of you walked away inspired by it? I think your silences, speaks volumes. But look at what Obama was doing. The environmental movement is what puts one of the sectors of the society that puts its might, on the side of the Democratic Party. And what was this man doing? He was bragging about the Keystone XL. And I want you to remember what Occupy did. Remember when the environmental movement activists were able to cordon the White House to put a moratorium on one section of the Keystone XL? It was a brilliant success. It's an indefinite moratorium, and we're going to have to keep fighting that battle. But if you recall, some of the most prominent activists in that struggle pointed out very correctly that that energy that went to the White House that day in the form of passionate activism, that would not have happened if it were not for Occupy. Occupy really has inspired a new generation into activism, and we are running this campaign. This is an Occupy-inspired campaign, and we want this campaign to serve to whatever extent it can as a platform for further movements, as a platform for taking the word out there in order to get people to understand that we really need change, and we need dramatic change. So, moving on to the state race, just a few facts about it. As Philip mentioned, we are running against the House Speaker, Frank Chop. And if you look at his record and the record of the Democratic Party in the state of Washington, it is no different than what's happening at the federal level. The Democratic Party leadership operates in the same way. Basically, what we have, whether you're talking about the state or a national level, you have a two-party system that together, in this nice little good cop, bad cop routine, serves their corporate masters. So they'll come and tell you that, Frank Chop, if you hear what he says, he'll say, you know what, we really, really, really wanted to save higher education. But what could we do? We had to cut somewhere because we had to balance the budget. And what has happened since 2008? There has been more and more and more cuts to higher education, more and more cuts to grant-based funding, and more movement towards loan-based funding. Then he said that we need to cut education because we need to save healthcare. But in the next budget, they went ahead and cut healthcare anyway. So what they're doing really is passing out little crumbs here and there, and they're offering us a choice between either completely eliminating basic health, completely eliminating funding for students, completely eliminating the disability lifeline, a choice between that and saving a few dollars here and there for that. We have to reject that as a false choice, because look at this state. We are living in one of the wealthiest states in the country, and this country is the wealthiest country not only in the world, but in the history of humanity. Are they expecting us to believe that in such a state and such a country, they don't have enough money to fund education and healthcare? I mean, that is just ridiculous. So if you look at where the money goes, it goes to all the big corporations, it goes to the billionaires. Last year alone, Microsoft made a profit of $23 billion. I mean, anybody have an idea of how much money that is? That is more than enough to fund several students for 4 years of good quality education. But they don't want that. So whenever somebody comes and tells you that there's no money for this, completely reject that nonsense and tell them that this is not an accounting problem, this is a political problem, because we don't have anyone in Olympia to represent our interests. We have 98 people in Olympia who, to one degree or another, are representing corporate interests. And it's high time we had someone who will represent students, young people, workers, the elderly, and the disabled. And how are we going to fund free high-quality public education? How are we going to fund free healthcare, single-payer healthcare, as Jill mentioned? Why do you tax the super wealthy? You tax the big corporations, you tax capital gains, you tax wealth. And of course you're going to run into the next question, which is, well, if you tax the super wealthy, I mean, aren't they the job creators? Aren't they going to take jobs elsewhere? And I will say to you, as a socialist, that yes, there is a little bit of truth in that, in the sense that this is a global system of capitalism which rewards capital ownership to a very, very high and extreme degree, and rewards labor very, very little. So we get very little. The 99% of the world gets very little. So the reality is that as long as we have a system where there is yet another source of labor somewhere else, whether it's in South Carolina or the Philippines, is beside the point. As long as there is another group of workers who is more desperate than us and is willing to accept lower wages than us, yes, the jobs that can move will move. But think about this. If we accept that logic, and if we say that, well, if we tax the corporations, they're going to move the jobs, then what we are accepting is a global and nationwide race to the bottom. So what you have is the governments of all the 50 states competing not to give you the best standard of living, but to give the maximum profits and tax breaks to corporations. But there is no end to it. So if you give more tax breaks this year to corporations in the hope that they won't move jobs, that's not going to help you. It's going to just make it worse and worse and worse for everybody. Let the state of Washington, let people of Washington state be the first ones to reject that and say, no, we don't care. We are going to tax the corporations, and if they want to leave, the CEOs can leave. Boeing is here, the factories are here, the machines are here, the workers are here. We can take the factory into democratic public ownership and run it democratically together, meaning we, the workers, the community, make the decision. That this is what socialism is about. I wanted to, make clear what we mean and why we are, we have a very specific anti-capitalist agenda here. The reason is that if you accept the logic of capitalism, you are going down the drain. I mean, we are all, quickly racing to the bottom, and there is no more compelling argument against capitalism than climate change, which has already been talked about. None of the oil corporations, neither of the two big parties, have any incentive to make a move towards renewable energy, the technology for which exists today. But the reason we're not doing it is because we who care about it don't have the power. We don't have the purse strings of the economy in our hands, which is what we need. And I want to, I and Socialist Alternative together, we want to use our campaign platform to raise those ideas. And I also want us to realize that this is not just any old meeting. This is historic. You have a Green Party presidential candidate and an openly socialist candidate where, we have endorsed, we're proud to endorse Jill Stein's run for the presidency. They have endorsed our campaign. We are, we're bringing this message out together. This is another 60s and 70s in the making here. I want all of you to join in this struggle. And as Jill correctly mentioned, it's not just about running elections. Elections for us as activists are a tool to build and help build social movements. And in reality, if you think about it, elections are not the most favorable terrain for activists in the sense that the system is so rigged against us. I mean, Jill Stein had to get arrested when she went to, oppose the blackout of the debate, and I think that deserves but the reason we are running this election campaign is because this gives us this invaluable opportunity to reach out into the community and take this message to people who we know this strikes a chord with. But in reality, we have to use this opportunity to also make a call for larger movements. I mean, in reality, we are, if Occupy may be in a lull right now, but I think we are heading towards a period of much larger movements. We are in a historic period. So the choice for each of you today here is what is your individual role going to be in this period of movements that is going to happen whether or not you join it. So I think it's better that we participate, especially young people participate. And the last thing I will say, because I'm almost out of time, is that we really passionately hope that this conversation does not stop on November 6th. We want this conversation to go on. And what we really need is a broad-based mass movement. We need an uprising. Jill mentioned student debt. I mean, seriously, the only way young people can fight against student debt is by actually revolting against student debt. We need a revolt of millions of students in the sense that there should be a mass refusal to pay student debt. And if you look at the past, including slavery, as Jill mentioned, many of these laws are made by the rich to oppress the rest of us. But these laws become unenforceable if there are enough of us on the street refusing to comply with those laws, and that is precisely what we need. And we want to have that conversation started. And the last thing I will say is that we want to be able to take this message out and raise the banner of left coalitions and left movement building. And in Seattle, locally, we are starting to propose that the left should come together and run a slate of candidates for the Seattle City Council races, for the mayoral race, and I think I heard Jill mention that we would like to do it on a national level, run municipal elections of grassroots candidates. I think it's high time that we get that conversation started and start working on that after the election campaign is done. And every time I'm interviewed by the media, they ask me, you're so rigid. If you go to Olympia, how will you get anything done? You refuse to get into coalitions. And I think the response is that business has a lot of coalitions. There's lots of coalitions. Business has Democratic coalition with the Democratic Party. They have a coalition with the Republican Party. We should reject those coalitions and form coalitions of ordinary people, of the 99%, so that we can once again create history.